Tonight, Starmer launches Labour's Change manifesto, promising wealth creation. But how's he going to manage it? The Institute for Fiscal Studies says, like the Conservatives and the Lib Dems, Labour's taking part in a conspiracy of silence about the economic challenges the country faces. I'll be joined live by Labour's Shadow Foreign Office Minister, Lisa Nandy. And I'll also be getting reaction from the Conservatives from the party grandee, David Davis. Also tonight, Plaid Cymru launches its manifesto, calling for fair funding for Wales. And after last night's battle for number 10 leaders event here on Sky News, we've been asking people in Mansfield what they made of the show and the Labour manifesto. All that and more with James Starkey and Matt Lavender, who will be with us for the next hour. It's Thursday, I'm Sophy Ridge live from Westminster, and this is the Politics Hub. Hello, good evening. Well, today was a big day, perhaps the most significant in the entire election campaign. Labour Manifesto Day, when we got to see the policy platform of the party that will almost certainly form the next government. If the aim is to win the election, then today was a success. There was nothing in it to frighten the horses, nothing that could risk the commanding poll lead that Keir Starmer's built up. Nothing new at all. It was fully costed, it was professional. When asked if it was ambitious or exciting enough, Keir Starmer said he wanted to run the UK, not a circus. Labour will win the election by not being scary, by not making people afraid to vote for them, and more than anything, by not being the Conservative Party. So if you're judging the manifesto on whether it's an election winner, then job done. But I've got this nagging feeling that Labour is focusing almost solely on the task of winning the election, and not the task of governing. Because there was nothing in here about the reality that, if you want debt to be falling by the end of the Parliament, as both Labour and the Conservatives say they do, well, then you need billions of pounds of cuts to public services. It makes sense to not mention that if your sole aim is to win the election. But if your aim is to make it easier to govern when you're actually in power, well, surely you need to pitch roll if you want to take voters with you on that difficult journey. Well, let's take a look, shall we, at what exactly Labour are promising in the manifesto. We've read through the document, so you don't have to. Now, we talked a lot about tax on Tuesday when the Conservatives released their manifesto, so there's a lot about tax in the Labour manifesto as well. Let's have a little rattle through what they want to do here. So first up, they say they want to abolish the non-dom tax status and also end the use of offshore trusts. They want to cap corporation tax at the current 25%. They say that they'll cap it, they won't raise it. And they also say that they want to retain the triple lock for state pensions. No tax rises on working people, Keir Starmer had told Beth Rigby yesterday too, so no income tax rises. Health is a huge one for the Labour Party, of course. So on health, they are pledging 40,000 more appointments every single week. That is their way to cut waiting times. They also said they want to double the number of cancer scanners. And when it comes to recruitment, they want an extra 8,500 additional mental health staff. Now, one of their big pledges as well on immigration is this one, to create a new border security command. That's the way they say they will tackle the criminal smuggling gangs. They also said that they're going to end the Rwanda scheme that we spent so many years talking about. Well, that's not going to happen under a Labour government. They also want a new returns and enforcement unit as well, with an extra 1,000 staff. No specific immigration target set out, though, I should say. Another big pledge of theirs too that we've seen a lot about as well, on energy and the environment. This is their flagship policy there. They want to set up Great British Energy. They also say that they want to close the loopholes in the current windfall tax on oil and gas licences. They say it will get a bit more money, and invest £6.6 billion improving energy efficiency in people's homes. Around 5 million homes, they say, could benefit. Right, let's look at education now, shall we? So the flagship policy here, they want 6,500 new teachers and what they're describing as key subjects. And they also say they want to open 3,000 new nurseries. That's mainly upgrading space or using existing space in primary schools. And of course, their much talked about pledge to end the VAT exemption for private schools. But the evergreen question, how will all this be paid for? Something that all the parties are trying to set out. Labour say the manifesto is fully funded, fully costed. They'd raise, they claim, £5.8 billion in revenue by, yep, you guessed it, closing tax loopholes. Every manifesto, it feels like, has got that pledge in it somewhere, with slightly different amounts being raised. They also say they will raise an extra £1.5 billion through charging VAT on private schools. Right, our political editor Beth Rigby was there. This is her report.
For this Labour leader, things are looking up. Their message to the point, their manifesto over 100 pages long, but short on any new promises, no risks being taken here. There was something of a false start.
My generation is being let down by the Labour Party and this manifesto. You say that you're offering...
But this, a leader who won't be thrown off course.
We gave up on being a party of protest 5 years ago. We want to be a party of power.
Halfway through this election campaign, but here in Manchester it feels closer to the win than that. And Keir Starmer beginning to lean in.
A manifesto for wealth creation, a plan to change Britain. Because there is so much potential in this country, so much possibility if we stand together as 4 nations and back the ambition people have for their family and their community.
But nothing new today. Everything in this manifesto's already been announced. Starmer clearly doesn't think he needs a hard sell to voters. This is a 132-page document. On the cover it says change, but there's not a single new policy in it you haven't already announced. Is this a Captain Caution manifesto designed to protect your poll lead?
No. It is a serious plan for the future of our country. And every single policy in this document, policy after policy after policy, has been carefully thought through and tested to ensure that we can deliver it. This is a serious plan, carefully thought through. It's not about rabbits out the hat. It's not about pantomime. We've had that. I'm running as a candidate to be Prime Minister, not a candidate to run the circus.
But if the Labour leader and his team get this over the line, they will have to run a country, and that will take more than a one-word slogan. When you're talking about change, don't you really mean patience for the British people, that they're going to have to wait because you're not doing anything radical enough to really change this country?
Well, I think it's really radical to bring in the non-dom tax loophole to get the 40,000 appointments we need in our NHS to fix the dentistry.
If you don't get growth in the first 2-3 years, you're going to either have to cut or raise taxes. That's the truth.
But we're going to get growth.
And what if you don't get growth?
Well, I reject that hypothesis. We have a credible, a serious plan for growth in this manifesto. That is what this manifesto is all about, and that's what we're going to deliver.
Today at the G7, Rishi Sunak, away from the campaign trail, seemingly offered some sympathy by his Italian counterpart. But clear, this election comes down to just one issue.
You've seen 2 manifestos this week, and there's a clear choice at this election. We published a manifesto that's going to cut taxes for people in this country, and the Labour manifesto that was published today made it clear that taxes are going to rise.
But Starmer adamant this isn't the case. Can I just have a moment of honesty about this? Because if you don't raise taxes, you don't have enough money, do you, to rebuild public services?
I reject that argument. I reject this suggestion that is out there that all we can hope for our economy is that we flatline forever.
You think you're going to win, don't you?
Well, I've always said we've got to earn every vote. I've said polls don't predict the future. But as you would expect, I know the public would expect anybody who wants to be Prime Minister to be ready to hit the ground running.
There's no sign of Starmer slowing down, travelling to a football club in Cheshire to tackle yet another Tory target seat. Well ahead and determined to keep it that way.
Thank you so much.
Beth Rigby, Sky News, Manchester.
Well, it wouldn't be a manifesto day without our data and economics editor, Ed Conway, here to crunch through the numbers, to work out whether they add up, what it all means. You've been looking at Labour today, haven't you?
Yeah, and I mean, you were saying earlier, Sophie, that this is perhaps one of the biggest moments because where the polls are. You saw that interview with Beth and with Keir Starmer. It feels like this. What we're going to learn from them is this may be our lives in the next few years. The interesting thing, in a sense, was how little new there was about this manifesto. So what we've got here is just some of the big kind of line items of that's the stuff they want to spend money on. This is where the tax are going to come from. Just no surprises here. So extra money through non-doms and avoidance as well. Private schools, that's the VAT on private schools. You've got a bit of other stuff. But they've talked about all of this before, so no surprises. And no surprises there with the spending. I mean, it's interesting, at least, to just that we can actually kind of put numbers on this stuff now. I suppose that's the difference, and that's what we get in the manifesto. It's quite good, actually. These days we do get more numbers, and pretty much all of the parties so far have provided some figures. Normally we moan about that stuff, but they've been pretty good about this. But overall, that's taxes, 7.4 billion. That's spending. The thing they really wanted us to point out to us is, look, haven't they been so prudent, to use a Gordon Brown word? They've got this big buffer, so more taxes, not quite as much spending, so just in case anything goes wrong in the future.
I mean, I guess my big question, as it has been throughout the whole election campaign, is this in any way realistic? This number here, because this looks great. Wow, look, they've got all this money through taxes and this lovely buffer. But is that real?
Well, the buffer and that spending doesn't take account of the fact that you've got baked into the public finances, you've got these big spending cuts coming up in the future. We've talked about them again and again. It's what the IFS has called a conspiracy of silence. This is part of the conspiracy. It doesn't deal with that. If things go really well, maybe they'll find some money to be able to deal with it, but there's nothing within these figures that answers it. What's kind of interesting, though, as well, so they talk about the buffer and say, look how clever, how kind of careful we're being. The story's a bit more kind of sophisticated than that, because on top of that spending, you've also got the green investments. Okay, so it's not as big as the 28 billion a year. That's much smaller. It's kind of 4.7, I think it is. You've got extra windfall taxes, but then when you account for all of that, suddenly, actually, you're going from having this buffer to having extra borrowing to pay for that stuff. They say, listen, that's fine because we can manage it in the rules. It's investment to make the economy better and for all that green energy stuff. But even so, it is a more nuanced story, shall we say. But I reckon what's kind of perhaps the most striking thing is if we take all these boxes, so you've got investment, you've got spending, you've got taxes, and just do a bit of a comparison. Because this, for me, was always the moment I was kind of looking forward to, was when you've got those numbers, that's the Labour numbers on investment, the green bit, spending and taxes, how do those numbers compare with the other manifestos?
I love it how this is what Ed is really looking forward to. This says a lot about, what gets you going, Ed.
You may be excited to see them. Look, this is because it's really striking, isn't it?
Wow, to be fair, that is, yeah.
The Lib Dems really quite big, OK? The Conservatives bigger than Labour when it comes to these changes. So the size of the kind of changes that the Conservatives are proposing is significantly bigger than Labour. And the one that I imagine, is even you'll particularly like to see is comparing Labour not just with the other parties' manifestos, but comparing Labour 2024 with Jeremy Corbyn era Labour. Because I love this chart. I mean, I had to shrink down those bars so there's actually room for the rest of them. That's this manifesto 2024. That's Corbyn in 2019.
Wow.
And I mean, if Keir Starmer wanted to make a statement via data about how this is a changed party, you couldn't ask for better than that. So, it's pretty striking.
And interesting that he said, didn't he, that the Conservative manifesto is like the Corbyn manifesto, and I guess
yes,
it is more ambitious.
I mean, it's that, although actually it's nowhere near like the Corbyn manifesto. But even so, they are definitely the smallest. They win the prize. They are the most conservative with a small c. Of all of the manifestos.
We've been talking an awful lot about tax, right? That's where the Conservatives are trying to put all of their tax lines as well. So what do we learn about tax when it comes to Labour?
Yeah, well, exactly. We can now fill in this chart that we've been kind of filling in gradually as we got the manifestos. The tax burden, and worth saying, I think we've said it before, it's not the only way of looking at the state of the public finances. You can look at spending as well, the size of the state, other things, other charts are available. But this gives you a sense over time about how the amount of taxes we pay has evolved. And, we all know we're going through this period at the moment where they're planned to go higher and higher because all those tax thresholds have been frozen. The Conservative plans, we covered this before, didn't we? They're still going up. The tax burden's still going up, but definitely less quickly than it was before. Okay, so they can't claim that they're bringing it down, but it's going less quickly than it is before. But just Remember that when the Conservatives say we're cutting taxes. No, that's not quite right. However, Lib Dems, we saw that before, very big increase, partly because those bars were so big you saw earlier. Labour, here's the line that I guess we've been waiting for. So what does that mean? I mean, it is going up quicker than the current plans. It is not massively quicker, but when you take that line and you kind of draw a line going all the way back, you see how it just kind of goes above that level. So the Tories, I think, will be very keen to focus on the fact that this is technically the highest on record, and I think they've already put out a few attack lines on that. But we're within this kind of territory already, partly because of Conservative plans. And the line has gone up so much already, partly because, under a Conservative government, taxes went up. That's obviously, it wasn't just us, but even so, that's the picture now. And I think now we have the manifestos, we have more of a sense of kind of where we are.
Fascinating stuff, Ed. Thank you so much, as always, for talking us through the numbers and the data in that manifesto. Well, watching, I'm sure, very closely to all of Ed's charts was Labour's Lisa Nandy, who joins us now live from Salford. Thank you so much for being with us. So Ed Conway just explaining that under your manifesto, a Labour government would preside over the highest tax burden in history. Do you accept that?
Well, we don't accept that because we think that that is very misleading. There are some specific measures to make fairer decisions on tax in our manifesto that we've set out today, but those measures don't fall on working people. For example, we've decided to equalise the situation so that private schools pay a similar level of VAT. We've proposed a windfall tax on the big oil and gas giants, all to be able to fund ordinary working people to have better standards of living, whether that's cheaper energy bills or better teaching available in schools. And I think it is a bit rich from the Conservative Party, frankly, who's presided over the highest tax burden on working people in over 70 years, to be accusing Labour of making life harder for people. The manifesto that we've published today is about making life easier for people through making fairer decisions and bringing taxes down where we can to help people to be able to get on in life.
Just to say, there's absolutely no value judgment here about making people's lives harder or not. It's a simple point, and you can say that we're talking about taxes, for example, private schools, that is different from taxes on working people. But it is true, isn't it, that if this manifesto was implemented, it would be the highest tax burden in history?
Well, that assumes that we continue with 14 years of Conservative failure, and Labour doesn't intend to do that for one moment. We've had a high-tax, low-growth economy for nearly a decade and a half, and we've made no secret of the fact. We've made no secret of the fact that we think that the tax burden on working people is far too high. We've been critical of the Tories for that, and we would like to see taxes, mortgages and rents kept as low as possible. That's why our number one pledge going into this election is about delivering economic stability. You've got people paying a very, very high price for economic instability, particularly under the Liz Truss government and with the impact on rents and mortgages. We want to see that overall burden on people come down, but we're not going to make promises that we can't keep. That's why everything in here is fully costed, fully funded, and is a plan for growth, to grow the economy so that people are better off and that they feel better off under a Labour government.
Growth is clearly a big part of your plans. I want to talk about that in a minute. But first, Keir Starmer said today there wouldn't be a return to austerity. But at the same time, your manifesto seems to accept public spending plans that would mean big cuts to unprotected departments after the next election. I mean, the IFS says this would mean cuts of between 1.9% and 3.5% a year. So over a parliamentary term, we could be seeing 15% cuts to unprotected departments, prisons, roads, courts, welfare. I mean, let's call a spade a spade. That is austerity, isn't it?
Well, Keir Starmer didn't come into politics to preside over austerity, and neither did I. We've had a ringside seat to the devastation that the Tories have wreaked on our public services and on our communities over the last 14 years, and that's why growth is our mantra through this election. Every measure in this manifesto is aimed at making life easier for people and delivering growth. Take our promise on breakfast clubs, for example, to help people go into the workplace, to be able to to work the hours that they need to get money into the pockets of working people and help to keep the economy growing. All of these measures are about growing the economy, not about cutting
I will
services.
talk about growth, as I said, but just on this austerity point, because it's really important. The IFS has said there's a conspiracy of silence. You know, you say you want debt falling by the end of the Parliament. That means huge cuts to unprotected departments. Let's level with people. You say it's not austerity. Well, what's your definition of austerity? Because for most people, that is austerity.
Well, but that's not what we intend to do. So I'm not quibbling with you about the definition of austerity.
This is what the IFS is saying. Your manifesto is accepting. You know, I can't square this. I can't get my head around it. It feels to me like you're just being deliberately evasive.
Well, look, I'm not a politician who's particularly known for being evasive. I tend to answer the question, and I'm certainly trying to answer your question now, because I think it's really important for people to understand the direction of travel that a Labour government will take this country in. We don't accept that we should have such low ambitions for our economy, that in one of the largest economies in the world, that we have high taxation and low growth. We think we can grow the economy, and today we set out how we intend to go about doing that, whether it's planning reform to get Britain building again, whether it's free breakfast clubs and the New Deal for working people, to help people with flexible work, to get back into the workplace, to be able to maintain the jobs that they've got and decent standards. All of these things are aimed at growing their economy so that there are more proceeds from the economy that we can invest into our public services and help to improve them. We set out the first steps to how to do that. They're all fully funded and fully costed, but that's not the limit of our ambitions, and it shouldn't be the limit of Britain's either.
Let's talk about growth then, because it's pretty clear that what this Labour Party under Keir Starmer is saying is, as you say, you don't want higher taxes, you want to cut taxes, you said. You don't want austerity, you're banking on growth, right? So I was just looking at the growth forecast. The OBR projecting growth of around 2% a year for the next 5 years. It's pretty standard across countries, 2% growth. Some people think that's actually quite optimistic given the state of the global economy and the global instability. If the OBR's current projections is 2% of growth a year, what do you think you can achieve under a Labour government?
Well, in our manifesto, we've got a fully set of costings on page 126, 127 and onwards.
What growth level do you think you can achieve under a Labour government? What growth level?
No, but the only reason I reference the manifesto is because that's where you can see that we've taken the most difficult forecasts and the highest prices based on the OBR forecasts. And we've left, as Ed was saying just as I joined the show, a bit of wiggle room as well, in case those forecasts turn out not to be correct. So we've taken the most difficult forecast available and put that into the manifesto, because that means that we know that regardless of external circumstances, you know, we've got a war in Ukraine going on, we've got other things happening in the world, we know that we can meet these spending commitments. And at a time when trust in politics is at an all-time low.
What I'm saying is, what it appears to me to be saying is, you're saying that we're going to fund our public services through increased growth. What is your growth target then?
Well, look, we've set out previously that we want to have the highest sustained growth in the G7. That is a long-term ambition, but all of the measures in this manifesto are aimed at starting on day one, whether it's planning reform, whether it's...
You can't just fund schools through a long-term ambition. You know, you can't fund potholes through long-term ambitions. What's the growth forecast next year?
Well, no, but the long-term ambition...
You're going to need it to start
Sophie,
going up.
I don't really understand why you don't think I'm answering the question, because the long-term ambition is to have the highest sustained growth in the G7. The immediate ambition is to start growing the economy on day one. We've been really clear about that, and we've set out how today in this manifesto.
OK. I'm keen to talk a little bit as well about the leaders' debate that we saw last night, the Sky News one. It should be fair to say that most people polled by YouGov thought Keir Starmer did pretty well. He outperformed Rishi Sunak in their view by the margin of around 2-1. He got a bit of a difficult time from Beth Rigby about his previous support for Jeremy Corbyn, and he said that the reason that he backed Jeremy Corbyn as leader of the Labour Party and to be Prime Minister was because he didn't think Labour would win that election. You backed Jeremy Corbyn as well. You served in his shadow cabinet. Did you not think he was going to win either?
Well, look, I mean, we all made different choices at what was a really difficult time for the Labour Party. Some people left the party altogether, some people went to the back benches, some people served on the front bench. We were all trying to serve the country as best that we possibly could. All I would say to you is judge Keir Starmer by his actions. He said he would tear anti-Semitism out of the Labour Party by its roots. And that is exactly what we've done. We're not complacent about that. We'll never be complacent. We'll challenge racism wherever we see it in whatever form it takes. But he's done that over the last 4 years, and that's something that he said he would do. Jeremy's not standing as a candidate at this election. We're going into the election with a cast-iron guarantee to people that it's their money, they haven't got a lot of it, and we will never play fast and loose with the public finances because it's working people who pay the price. We've changed the Labour Party under Keir's leadership. So I would just say to your viewers, judging by his actions, that's exactly what he's done. He came into politics to make a difference to working people. He's led the charge to put the Labour Party back in the service of working people. And I'm very proud of this document that we published today because I can look my constituents in Wigan squarely in the eye and say every single thing that we are promising to do, we will deliver.
Do you think you're going to win the election?
Not a single vote has been cast yet, so we're confident that we're right about the future of this country, but we'll never be complacent. Straight after the manifesto launch, I was out in the rain in Bolton with our fantastic candidate there knocking on doors. We're fighting for every vote in this election, not because after 14 years in opposition there's a lot at stake for the Labour Party, but because there's everything at stake for the country. If people want change, they've got to go out and vote for it.
OK, thank you very much indeed. Lisa Nandy speaking to us there from that ITV debate in Salford. And reaction to Labour's manifesto is sure to feature in tomorrow's newspapers. I'm sure there'll be lots to chew over in our extended press preview and news review. That will be from 10:30 p.m. this evening with tonight's news and tomorrow's headlines. Joining us for that, the press preview tonight 10:30, we will have the columnist and broadcaster Steve Richards and the Telegraph's deputy comment editor Annabel Denham. So Steve Richards and Annabel Denham chewing over the Labour manifesto in our press preview. It'll be interesting to see, of course, what the newspapers make of that as well, whether or not they think the Labour sums add up, whether or not they think it's an election-winning manifesto. And, of course, the question we're asking tonight on the Politics Hub, can Starmer deliver change? In just a few moments' time, we should be able to take you to Salford, where the latest TV debate is due to take place tonight. Our Chief Political Correspondent John Craig is standing by. We're just getting him mic'd up just to fill you in on what's happening. We've got to switch over the microphones between him and Lisa Nandy. But there we go, John Craig standing by for us in Salford. What are you expecting?
I was mic'd up. Anyway, never mind.
Sorry, John.
Well, in the last few minutes, Pat McFadden, that's Labour's campaign chief, has said, in tonight's debate, Angela Rayner will make Labour's case for change and reach out to the public to turn the page on the Tory years. Well, indeed, Angela Rayner is one of 7 taking part tonight. It is Angela Rayner for Labour. It's the same lineup, actually, as a debate on another channel last Friday between 7 politicians. Angela Rayner for Labour, Penny Mordaunt for the Conservatives, Nigel Farage for Reform, Stephen Flynn for the SNP, he's the Westminster leader, Daisy Cooper, the Lib Dems deputy leader, the Greens co-leader Carla Denyer, and for Plaid Cymru, who had their manifesto launched today, Reen Ap Iorwath. I think I've got that right. But he was pretty good in the last time these 7 were all debating together. The Reform UK leader, Nigel Farage, was described to me as impish during that debate. He came out with lines like, for example, that Sir Keir Starmer is Blair without the flair. There was a clash between Penny Mordaunt and Angela Rayner on tax. We can expect a lot more of that because the Tories want to hammer Labour on tax with their claim that households will all be paying an extra £2,000, a claim that the Labour Party says is a lie. Remember, the most memorable thing from that debate last Friday was when, quite unprompted, Penny Mordaunt said that Rishi Sunak had been, in her words, completely wrong to leave the D-Day ceremony early in Normandy the day before. So we probably hear some more criticism of the PM for that, but given that we've now had the manifestos of the two big parties, and indeed the Lib Dems and now the Greens today, we probably hear a lot more about their specific policies, with no doubt Angela Rayner attacking the Tories and in quite a combative way, but Penny Mordaunt hitting back and making those tax allegations against Labour. And who can predict what Nigel Farage will have to say?
John, thank you very much indeed. John Craig there in Salford. Right, let's get the thoughts of our duo for tonight, shall we? The former Conservative Special Advisor, James Starkey, and the former Labour Party Advisor, Matt Lavender. Great to have you both on the programme today. Lots to chew over with Labour. Matt, to you first, because, you know, you were working for the Labour Party until not too far long ago. What did you make of the manifesto? Was it a breakthrough moment?
I don't think it was a breakthrough moment, no, but I don't think it needed to be, because when the polls are the way they are, I think it was fair enough to take a relatively cautious approach. I don't think there are ever going to be massive surprises today. I think if we were going to have a massive rabbit out of the hat, you would have had some sign, and actually 18 months or 2 years of Labour Party strategy under Keir Starmer suggested they're not going to do something like that. So no, I don't think it was a breakthrough moment, but ultimately they're well ahead in the polls. I think people are absolutely fed up of the Conservative government, and they feel that it's time for change. And so ultimately the job that Keir Starmer had to do today is a very, very different job from what Rishi Sunak had to do a couple of days ago. And ultimately they've delivered a manifesto which is quite in keeping with a strategy that seems to be working. Well,
do you agree with that then, or do you think it needed to be, I guess, a bit more ambitious?
No, I think and there's two ways to look at it. I think for the campaign, that's absolutely right. The interesting thing will be they're obviously likely to win the election. And as people have been... I thought the debate last night was a perfect encapsulation of this. If you just look at the audience, forget the questions the leaders got, you could tell with the audience they looked at Keir, I thought, and thought, we think you're going to put our taxes up. We don't really know... There was the question about how you're actually going to get regional growth. And the answer was, well, we're all going to work together, but there wasn't really any extra money. And Ed was showing those charts as well with you earlier, which shows even without the things we don't know they're going to spend on, there's going to be tax rises. So there's issues in store for later, but where they are in the election right now, running an election campaign, they're pursuing the perfect strategy, because it's not them that needs a game-changing moment, it's the Conservatives.
Mike, I kind of opened the show by putting forward the argument that, yes, from an election-winning perspective, this makes sense. But does it make sense if you're the party that is expecting to govern after the election? Don't you need to pitch roll a bit? I mean, I'm thinking a bit about, you know, David Cameron and George Osborne. They did a lot of pitch rolling on austerity before that 2010 election.
Yeah, and I think that is potentially something that they might find difficult when they get into power. But I think it's also worth bearing in mind that the Labour Party's been out of power for a long time. You know, it seems inevitable now that they're going to win a big majority, but it hasn't seemed like that for so long. They've suffered so many defeats, so many setbacks, that actually the idea of getting carried away and starting to plan for government before you've got there is something that people in Labour are innately very concerned about doing. They are a bit more cautious about that. But ultimately there are going to be some incredibly difficult choices to make, which Ed's graphs earlier on sort of laid out some of those. And ultimately you are going to need to do a little bit of pitch rolling to get people ready, but I think they're a little bit worried about sort of trying to run before they've sort of proven they can walk. Really.
Yeah, get into government first, I guess.
I think so.
There's a nervousness around that. What do you think, James?
I think that's right. I think the big test we'll see with them is their first 6-12 months. That's when you get your honeymoon period. I've seen new leaders, even obviously we've had a few with the Conservatives. I've been around when they've come in. And what you do get, you can see it happen in Westminster and around it, is you do get that the people move to power. So you know, if they do go on to win, as the polls suggest, he will have a honeymoon period where he can then set out. He'll have the King's speech. In that first 6 months, they'll be able to set stuff out and they'll be able to do it.
Do you think Rishi Sunak should have done a bit more when he was first made Prime Minister?
I've got a lot of sympathy for him, actually, because I think this, where he took over, the party was at a very volatile state. You know, we've gone through Liz and Boris was still overshadowing it. So I think people will say Rishi should have done much more. If you remember at the time, if it had pushed things too far with the party, he wouldn't have been able to hold it together. So I think, you know, history will kind of look at him in certain ways, but I think that's one of the things where his hands were relatively tied.
We'll talk a bit more about the Conservative Party later in the programme, but for now, thank you very much indeed, Matt Lavender and James Starkey. There, you're watching the Politics Hub. Coming up, Plaid Cymru launched their manifesto, but how prominently did Welsh independence feature? Perhaps less than you might think. More after this break.
think if the romance causes a conflict or a dual relationship, then absolutely they must disclose. But if the relationship doesn't cause a conflict or a dual relationship, then why should they?
Would you say office relationships are a good thing?
Generally speaking, of course they are. I mean, you get to meet somebody and really know something about them, their character, how they deal with difficulty, whether or not they respond with kindness to people who are lower down the food chain than they are. So it's a good idea to meet somebody, to take your time and meet someone and get to know them before you start to date them. If you're approaching dating with a clear head, then you're less likely to make mistakes because you're going to be thoughtful. And if you meet somebody at work, then you're probably less likely to rush into the bedroom with them, for example. So you can take the time to consider what is it you really want for a relationship? What are your relationship themes that you're looking for? What are the qualities you're looking for in the other person? And what are your non-negotiables? And that's perhaps the most important thing to get clear about, your own personal non-negotiables. And when you see those things in another person, run a mile.
Greg Milam, and I'm Sky's chief North of England correspondent. We aim to be the best and most trusted place for news.
Hello, welcome back to the Politics Hub. Well, Labour weren't the only party to launch their election manifesto today. Plaid Cymru has also unveiled theirs, pledging what they call fairer funding for Wales. But perhaps strangely, for the self-styled Party of Wales, there was very little emphasis on the prospects for Welsh independence. Dan Whitehead reports.
Pulling up in the Welsh capital, Plaid's promise to Wales, more fairness and ambition. That translates to a demand for more money from Westminster.
Plaid Cymru is the only party advocating for the abolition of the Barnett's formula, which has seen Wales lose out to the tune of billions of pounds now over the years. It's not a begging bowl. It's just doing what's right, enabling investment in public services and in the economy.
Top of the list, £4 billion, Plaid says is owed to Wales from HS2.
This whole manifesto is centred on what Plaid believes is an unfairness in how Wales is funded by Westminster. As well as the money from HS2, they want extra cash for the NHS and also an increase in child benefit, which they say will lift 60,000 children in Wales out of poverty.
Rena Purworth insists Plaid does offer an alternative voice to Labour that has long been dominant in Wales.
What's your opinions of Plaid Cymru?
Well, like a lot of the parties, they've all got some good ideas, and but I'm voting Labour to, get the Tories out.
I personally don't usually vote for Plaid, but I think it's, important to have that choice.
I think we need an alternative in Wales to Labour. I think we need an alternative to that, and we definitely need an alternative in Westminster.
At today's launch, there was no mention of independence. You have to go to page 42 in the manifesto to find it.
There have been some critical that you've not been as vocal as your predecessors on independence in Wales. Are you planning to lay out a timetable for a referendum, for instance?
I believe with every sinew in my body that Wales won't be able to reach its potential until we have all the levers of change in our hands. But we also work right now within a UK context. And it's my job through this manifesto to take the battle to whoever is in Downing Street now.
Boundary changes mean the number of Welsh MPs is going down at this election from 40 to 32. That's hit Plaid hard. 2 of their 4 seats won last time have gone. They have a battle on their hands to ensure the Welsh voice is heard. Dan Whitehead, Sky News in Cardiff.
Coming up next on the Politics Hub, Rishi Sunak is in Italy for the G7. How can he turn around the Conservatives' fortunes when he gets back? I'll speak to the former Brexit Secretary, David Davis. Hello, welcome back. Well, the Prime Minister has left the domestic political campaign today to attend the G7 summit in Italy. Rishi Sunak met his fellow leaders and pledged an additional £242 million in funding to Ukraine. But he faced questions about the investigation into a senior aide for placing a bet on the date of the election. Craig Williams was reported to have placed a £100 bet on a July election just days before Mr Sunak named the date as the 4th of July. He says he will cooperate fully with any investigation. The Prime Minister gave his reaction.
Very disappointing news, and you would have seen Craig Williams say that it was a huge error of judgment. Now, there's an independent inquiry that is ongoing, which is necessarily confidential as well as independent, and you'll appreciate that given that, it wouldn't be appropriate for me to comment while that's ongoing.
Well, let's speak now to the former Brexit Secretary, David Davis. He's in Salford for that 7-away television debate. Last night, of course, we had our Sky News Leaders event where a YouGov poll showed that people thought that Keir Starmer beat Rishi Sunak by a margin of 2-1. Is it all over for the Conservative campaign?
No, certainly not on the basis of what I'm seeing on the doorstep. I mean, look, this is my 11th election campaign. In all of them, things go wrong on both sides. And the polls go all over the shop and they don't necessarily indicate the outcome. You know, the error margin is between 6 and 20% between the polls and the outcome. Now, what I'm seeing on the doorstep is people are beginning to focus, and just beginning, it's taken a couple of weeks, to focus on the substantive issues for themselves. And so this week is likely to be tax, because you've had a tax-cutting Tory manifesto and a Labour manifesto, which tried to avoid the issue, but has been described by the IFS as tax raising, even by the Left-Wing Resolution Foundation as ushering in a parliament of tax rises. So my people worry about that. The people I've seen on the doorstep worry about that, and they are starting to look past all the shenanigans with Farage and so on and saying, you know, I might have voted reform, but actually that'll just help Labour. I'm going to vote Tory. And I've seen that a number of times in the last few days.
You're saying that there's hope left, that you're getting good vibes on the doorstep. I just want to talk to you a little bit about the leader of your party, about Rishi Sunak, because you yourself, you didn't have a stereotypical Tory upbringing yourself. You were raised by a single mum. You're on a London council estate. Do you acknowledge that it's a problem that you have a leader who, I guess, struggles to talk about sacrifice and hardship in a way that people don't find a bit ridiculous?
Well, no. I mean, look, not everybody who leads the country has to come from a council estate. I come from a council estate. I'm the son of a single mum. But, you know, Cameron plainly didn't, and he got returned by a large majority. So, you know, that's just part of it. I think I heard a bit of the as it were, the attack on him for not having Sky TV. I just took that as a demonstration of the thing his parents one of the things his parents sacrificed to send him to a very good school. So I think people are far less fussed about what I would term the media bubble on this, and far more concerned about, you know, what's he like? How well does he run the country? Does he do a good job? Has he brought inflation down? Is he beginning to get the finances back on an even keel? Did he stop us having mass unemployment during COVID? Really serious questions, not ones which, if you like, are the gossip column of television.
OK, and just one final question, because I know you got to dash as well. You said that you've been through, I think, 11 elections before. You were there for 1997.
This is my 11th.
So this is your 11th. You were there for 1997. You, of course, saw that long period of opposition. How bad is it in opposition? And do you worry the Conservatives are heading there again?
I don't recommend opposition. It's really hard. It's hard work. It's difficult, certainly in the early years. It's very difficult to score any points. I mean, remember William Hague's time, very difficult too. So I don't recommend it at all. I mean, in a way, I quite enjoy opposition because I'm quite good at it. I'm an oppositionist MP in some ways. But truth be told, for most of the Conservative Party, it's a grim thing to do if that's where we end up. But, you know, we are still 3 weeks away from the result. And remember, when Margaret Thatcher was Prime Minister, 3 weeks was the length of the whole campaign, so there's plenty of time for things to change.
OK, thank you very much indeed. Always good to talk. David Davis there from Salford.
Thank you.
Well, let's talk to James and Matt, shall we? I love that on opposition. He wouldn't recommend it.
He was very good at it.
Yeah, there you go. Do you think the Conservatives are heading there again?
I mean, at the moment, if you look at the polls, you'd have to be slightly deluded not to think that that's the way things are going. Without something that changes what's going on. I speak to people that are out on the doorsteps. I think, you know, different seats, there's maybe MPs that will hold out hope for their seat, but I don't think there's many people you think we're heading back into government.
Opposition. He wouldn't recommend it.
No, nor would I. It is difficult. I remember trying to sort of read through a piece of legislation that 200 civil servants have drafted and doing it with just 2 people. Like little things like that actually make a massive difference. So yeah, it is very difficult. I thought in the Sky debate last night, I did think Rishi Sunak looked a little bit defeated in a way that actually, even with everything that's been going on, I didn't think he did earlier in the campaign. But he was sort of stood there bravely taking the blows from Beth and then from the audience. But I thought ultimately people had stopped listening, and they wanted to almost have a pop at him in the audience, ask their question. But I don't think anyone was really being persuaded by the answer, and I think you could see that a little bit in his body language.
OK, thank you both very much indeed. More for you after the break, because still to come on the Politics Hub. We're in Mansfield to see whether voters have changed their minds after a hectic 24 hours, including Sky's battle for number 10 and that Labour manifesto launch.
Coming up on the UK Tonight, I'll be joined live by the mother of Harry Dunn following the conclusion of the inquest into her son's death and the damning report from the coroner. Some of the audience from the battle for number 10 will be back to give their verdict, and the Tartan Army marches on Munich on the eve of the Euros. All that and much more on the UK Tonight at 8.
I'm Martha Kellner and I'm Sky's US correspondent based here in Los Angeles.
It's turning everybody into, a crazy, violent drug addict.
How are you feeling?
I am angry. It is an anti-woman agenda.
2 women say that you paid for their abortions. Are you a hypocrite, sir? Will your candidates win?
I hope so. I think they will. I think they're great candidates.
I gotta be realistic. My sister's dead.
More than 4 weeks on, there's no murder weapon and no suspect. Are you going to catch this killer?
We are doing everything we can.
Ghislaine Maxwell has pleaded not guilty to all 6 charges against her. Mum, how are you feeling today?
Jeffrey said, you answer to Ghislaine, you just don't cross her.
They're so excited.
Severe nightmares of these people coming in and just taking me in the middle of the night.
I've watched as whole towns were torn apart by natural disaster.
I'm alive and I'm thankful for that, but there are a lot of people who aren't.
It's not the winds people fear most here, it's the water. We take you to the heart of the stories which shape our world. Do you truly believe what you're saying?
A lot of cases that I know are reported from Ukrainian missiles themselves.
Ambassador, with respect, I think that's preposterous. Hello, welcome back to the Politics Hub. Well, we're officially 3 weeks away from the election today, so we can check in on where the parties have been focusing their campaign across the nations. The Liberal Democrats were in Kent to announce their plan for young carers, a key manifesto pledge for Aide. In Scotland, the SNP continued their campaign in Edinburgh. They've been in Edinburgh an awful lot. In Wales, of course, Plaid Cymru launched their manifesto pledges in Cardiff. And as we've been discussing, the second manifesto launch of the day came from Labour in Manchester, and Keir Starmer was also out on the campaign trail in nearby Crewe. Our Deputy Political Editor Sam Coates has been finding out how Labour's manifesto launch has been going down with voters in Mansfield. Now, the constituency is a key target for Labour. It was held by the party until 2017 when it switched to the Conservatives, and you can see this is the 2019 result, the Conservatives increasing their majority. But are voters there convinced by Keir Starmer's plan?
There you go. Thank you. Voters at this election want delivery after a parliament of broken promises. At this lunch club in Mansfield near Nottingham, the diners want to believe Keir Starmer would serve up something different.
I know I'm going to vote right, not this lot. I'm going to give Keir a chance.
Do you know anything at all about what he stands for, what he do?
Not really. No, not really. It can't be any worse than this lot.
Have you been following Keir Starmer? What do you make of what he might do?
People that ask you to vote for them, they're telling fibs, which is, I believe, correct.
You think Keir Starmer's telling fibs, even though you're going to vote for him?
Well, all of them.
It doesn't seem feasible
what they want to do with the amount of cash that they say they've got or will get. I can't see that they're going to do it that way.
This is a really Tory area.
Yeah.
Do you think there's a chance Labour might win it?
I do. Yes, I do think they might. £3 for £10, yeah.
Will the people of Mansfield trade up their MP? This seat at the upper end of Labour's ambitions, a 16,000 Tory majority. It would fall in a landslide. Are voters buying the wares on display?
Yeah. You watched the Sky programme last night. Who do you think won?
I think it's Starmer, I think. Come over, maybe just edge the bets a bit.
Michael will vote Labour next month, but he's far from wowed by today's offering.
What do you make of the types of things that Keir Starmer is choosing to talk about?
It just feels like I've heard it all before, to be quite honest. I'm pretty open-minded. I listen to all the debates, but no, I'm not sure what he's going to come out with at the end of the day.
Does it feel specific?
It doesn't feel, no. There's no.
Labour has agonised over its manifesto, but people around here worry that the promises either won't come true or they'll end up paying for them in higher taxes. But at the moment, that's better than the alternative.
It's a lovely community.
Sharon runs a local charity and knows better than most why there's an appetite for change in this town.
It's broken. The system's broken.
What do you think the people around here really want to change?
I think they just want to play their part and be valued for their part, and actually to feel like they can take part in life generally. But there's so much of what they experience is about having to battle for everyday rights. 1 and 9, 19.
Voters concentrating hard, so nothing left to chance in the Labour manifesto.
65, 65.
But even if no one takes a risk, someone has to win.
Thank you.
Keir Starmer hopes his number comes up on election
3
day.
and 4, 34.
Sam Coates, Sky News, Mansfield.
3 and 8, 38.
Well, on your screen now are the confirmed candidates for the Mansfield constituency. The ones that you're currently looking at now, the confirmed candidates standing to become the next MP for Mansfield. Right, before we go, just a quick chat now with James and Matt. I bet you've both done a bit of door knocking in your time. I don't know if you're involved at all in the campaign this time round, or...
No, not so far. I have, although I always do think it gives you a much better perspective. I don't know what you think about. You just get a feel for where people are, and obviously it's why you've got Sam going out doing the Vox Pops. You kind of get much more of an understanding for what people really think and what, you know, why they're supporting one candidate or what they're most angry about. I think people should do it more.
Yeah, it's right, isn't it? If you stay in one geographical location or whatever, it's quite difficult to break out for that, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. I think you always get a different perspective. I think it's often interesting that people might talk about stories that have been getting a lot of coverage, but they'll come at it from a completely different point of view. Or they'll have spotted one thing in the story that really riled them, and that's probably at the bottom of the coverage, and so the story that we're seeing is a little bit backwards to what people are thinking. So yeah, I often think that politicians get a lot of criticism for being out of touch, but I think compared to a lot of people in and around Westminster, often they are...
You talking about journalists?
Not at all, not at all.
You're not coming back on. No, I'm joking. Thank you both very much indeed, James and Matt. Good to have you on the programme. That is it from us tonight. Ali Fortescue will be here at 7 tomorrow. Up next, it's the UK Tonight.